Hello and welcome to this short video, Record Keeping. My name's Andy Bowles and I'm a food lawyer. Now this is the third in a series of 100 short videos that I'm recording on UK food law topics. You may be watching this on our online training website, in which case you'll have access to a whole range of additional videos, webinars and online courses, as well as a library of resources. But if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, then of course you're very welcome. Now I'm talking about record keeping with respect to food hygiene law. So what does the law actually say? Well, I'm referring to the law requiring systems based on HACCP principles. Now, if you're not familiar with systems based on HACCP principles, there's a separate video on that, so you might want to go and have a look at that first. But if you are familiar, you'll know that systems based on HACCP principles is a risk assessment. It's a food safety management system required in most food businesses. Now, if you have a look at the legal requirement, you'll see that record keeping is actually an element of a successful system based on HACCP principles, but record keeping is only required depending on the size and nature of a food business. So there's your legal requirement. It's not an absolute requirement for record keeping. Nothing in food hygiene law requires you to keep temperature control records, for example. What's actually the driver behind this is your systems based on HACCP principles. So it depends on the nature and size of the food business. So what does that mean in practice? Well, let's use an example. If, for example, I'm just a retail shop and it's just me, and I have a little retail shop, and in the morning I open my shop and in the evening I close my shop. I have one refrigerator in there. So in the morning I check my temperature of my refrigerated goods, and in the evening I check to make sure they're okay. So do I need to keep records? Well, there's two things. Remember, nature and size. The nature, we're talking about relatively low risk. The products in my fridge are pre-packed foods. They're not really of particular high risk. Secondly, the size of my business, which is just me. So in other words, what's the point of me keeping records? If it's part of my daily routine, when I come in, I check the fridge. When I go home, I check the fridge. Writing that down doesn't really make any difference, does it? I mean, it might actually just interfere. If I go off and write things down, I might actually forget to do something else. So no, the law wouldn't require me to do that in such a low risk operation. Now, what about if we up it a bit? I'm a retail shop. I now am selling more high-risk foods. Maybe I've got cooked meats that have a limited shelf life, required to be kept at 8 degrees centigrade in order to assure their shelf life, and I employ 2 staff because I'm actually open 24 hours a day. Now, what I've done is I've changed the nature, because I put high-risk foods in, and I've changed the size. So now record keeping becomes more important, because if I don't check the temperature of my fridges, then the cooked meats might actually cause or might be implicated in a food poisoning outbreak or something. So they could become dangerous. So therefore, maybe I might need to put in some record keeping. So I still need to look at the benefit of this. And of course, the benefit comes from the fact that I'm now no longer just doing it myself. I've got 2 staff. If I've got staff member A and staff member B, how does A know that B has checked the fridges? How does B know that A's checked the fridges? How do I know that either of them have checked the fridges? If it's important to check, it needs to be done, then it would make sense for A or B to write down when they've checked the fridge temperatures and to actually note what the temperature was, so that I, as a food business operator, can be assured that they've checked that. So you can see how that works. If I'm in a catering establishment, if I'm just in a bed and breakfast and I serve up 2-3 cooked breakfasts every morning, now I might want to check the temperature of my sausages before I serve them to make sure they're properly cooked. But do I need to write that down? Well, if it's something I'm doing every morning, it's just me, why would I write it down? It's not really adding anything, is it? So you can see here the nature. All right, it might be sausage being cooked properly is obviously quite important, but the size is still very small, and actually writing it down doesn't really give much of a food safety benefit. However, if I've now got a restaurant and I've got 10 staff working there and I'm making sure I'm cooking foods, I might want to check my foods are being cooked properly on a regular basis through the day by probing. Now we're in a situation where, how do I demonstrate? How do I know that the checks are being done? Because I've got 10 staff. How does number 1 know that number 2's done it, or number 3's done it, or number 1's done it? What about number 4? Is his job to do it, but he's phoned in sick today. How do I How do I know it's being done in practice? And that's really the question you should be asking as a food business operator. Do I need to write down records? Well, what's the consequences of not writing it down? It's a bit like sort of spinning plates, really. You need to make sure you keep your eye on everything. And if you don't know whether things being done, then maybe you should be writing them down, but only really if it's important. Now, that's just a guide, but if you are using, going back to that catering situation, we're going to be using, say, the Food Standards Agency's Safer Food, Better Business, you'll know there that rather than hard rules on record keeping, what the Food Standards Agency recommend in a busy environment is incident reporting. So, in other words, what you'll have in your Safer Food, Better Business, you'll have some opening checks where you sort of tick things to make sure the thing's okay, and before you go home at night in your restaurant, you know, things to tick. But actually, you only need to write things down. If people are taking temperatures, rather than writing it down each time, what you would do is write it down if there's something wrong. So if number 4 checks the temperature of a sausage and finds it's only 60 degrees when it should have been 75, then they'll write that down as an incident and they'll write down what they did about it. Either they put it back in the oven or frying pan, whatever, or threw it away and then investigated it, whatever they did. So at the end of the day, as a food business operator, you're assured that people are checking temperatures, because if there was something wrong, they're going to write it down. Now there's nothing against that. I've had this discussion with many food business operators who say, well, I like to write temperatures down. Okay, well, we'll write it down then, it's up to you. There's nothing against keeping temperature records. The question is, at what point are you required in law to do it? Another question I get asked is on due diligence defences. If I don't write down temperatures, I can't have a due diligence defence. Is nonsense. If you have a safe system operating, and that safe system relies on you personally doing the checks or you personally receiving assurances from your staff, well then that is just as adequate as writing it down. If you're in a witness box saying, well, this is what I do this every day, well, that is as valid as showing a piece of paper. Remember, pieces of paper with temperatures written on them can be forged. So, sometimes courts can be quite suspicious of temperature records anyway. The important thing is to implement a system that works and is safe, and implement an adequate level of record keeping at the right places to ensure that the food safety management system is being properly implemented and properly monitored. Now, I'll just give you an analogy to finish with. And a good analogy for this is perhaps if you think of a situation of taking drugs, pills or something of that nature. For example, if it's just you and you're just taking, or me, taking a vitamin C tablet every day to supplement my diet, do I need to write that down that I've done it? Well, it's not very critical, so the nature of it isn't very high, and the size, it's not, it's just me. So therefore, I would say no, if I don't take a vitamin C tablet every day, it's not going to be really that important. If, however, I've put on a prescription of, say, antibiotics to be taken twice a day, should I be writing that down? Well, again, I can use cues. I can say, well, I'll take my first antibiotic after my breakfast and my second antibiotic after my dinner. There's the cue. It's not really going to be important for me to write that down because I will remember to do it. What about though if the doctor prescribes several pills to be taken, a red one to be taken in the morning, a blue one to be taken in the afternoon, as well as my antibiotics, as well as maybe having another one to take before I go to bed. It gets more complicated. As you see, the size of the operation, the nature of the operation is getting bigger. It's getting more complicated. Even though if I'm an individual, just myself, in order to manage all these pills, God forbid, that I'll be taking, I would probably it'd be recommended to write it all down. Otherwise, I might forget to take one. So that's just an individual. You can see if I'm just an individual business with just a few tasks, writing records is not really that helpful. If I'm an individual business and I'm multitasking, there will become a point where record keeping becomes more important. Similarly, if I'm in hospital, if I'm lying in my hospital bed now and you've got nurses and doctors on different shifts coming to attend to me, when they're taking my vital signs, you would expect them to write them down, to record them. You wouldn't expect a nurse to come along in the morning and say to another nurse, oh, did you give him his antibiotic? Oh, I don't know, did you? Oh, I've no idea. Perhaps we'll give him another one just in case. If you've got multiple staff, the chances of important activities being undertaken, like temperature checks at critical points, like antibiotics being given to a patient, these are important things. The chance of them actually being missed increases the more people you introduce, the bigger the operation. If you have a factory and you're making multiple, thousands of goods a day, and you've decided through your system based on HACCP principles that you've identified critical control points that require monitoring to ensure critical limits are being achieved, then actually recording that monitoring is going to be important. Otherwise, you won't know whether it's been done or not. So that's the key here. Record keeping. There is no absolute in record keeping. It's about the nature and size of the business activity to demonstrate or to ensure that the food safety management system is being implemented appropriately. In terms of keeping records, there's no legal requirement for that. You basically keep your records as long as it's necessary, in your view, to demonstrate to somebody else that the system has been implemented properly. So for example, if you're a manufacturer, you can keep your records maybe a year after the end of shelf life. But you might need to take into account whether consumers might have taken your product within shelf life and frozen it, in which case record keeping might need to be extended a bit further. If you're a small business, record keeping, if you're supplying foods that's supplied today and eaten today and gone tomorrow, well, you keep it for a month may be sufficient. You may be concerned about having piles and piles of records in your business. So it's up to you to decide. But remember, you will be inspected by your local authority. It might be if you're doing record keeping, and that's part of the way of demonstrating your system is operating, you might need to keep your records to demonstrate to them. So keeping them for a year might be a more appropriate way of working, or even 2 years if you're subject to an 18-month inspection. So as I say, it's up to you how long you keep them. It's up to you whether you record things and how you record it, but it should all be driven by your systems based on HACCP principles. Okay, there we are. That's just 1 out of 100 videos. I hope you join me on the other 99. Thank you for watching.